everyone, it's Kylie Stanbridge here from Floraville Public School. Today we're just answering a few questions in some little online tutorial videos about how you can assist your children through their reading journey. One of the most popular questions that we get asked is what to do if your child gets stuck on a word. So we thought we'd run you through a few little how-tos today. Firstly, keeping in mind that for a child that doesn't know a word, has an unknown word in front of them, it's often like looking at a symbol that could represent anything to them. They have no way of narrowing the field of what they know that symbol to be or not to be. So that's where we need to assist by employing these little strategies that can help them decode unknown words. So firstly, the first thing that you really need to do is remember that we're trying to upskill them. We're trying to increase their range of strategies so that they can try and attempt those unknown words independently, for us to be the last resort to help them. In doing that, we'd offer them the rich orientation, and we've also run a little video about orientating to text that you might like to take a look at if you haven't already. And then the second thing that we always do prior to reading the book is give them a little synopsis about what the book's about, and also characters' names. If they were already engaged in the reading process and stuck on a character's name, just tell them that character's name. We usually give them a wait time of about 3 seconds before we intervene with any strategy. And that 3 seconds is 1 and 2 and 3. It's quite a long time when you stretch it out, and often we jump in to help children prematurely. So today we're going to show you a few things on what you can do to upskill your children if they come across a word that they're unfamiliar with. The first thing that they'll innately want to go to is sounding out. And what that looks like is that they will often pick a word and they will try and sound out that word. This is a book called Birthday Presents, and it's about twins who are buying each other their birthday gift. And some of the words that you'll see in here, children will often try and sound them out. And to show you how futile this can be, I'm going to demonstrate that for you. So this word, toys. If a child was to read that, they might say, Matthew and Mum looked at the books and the t-o-y-s. And now you'll often see them go, t-o-y-s, t-o-y-s. No matter how many times they try and sound out that word, they're never going to get it using that strategy. Similarly with said. If they were to try and sound out said, oh dear, s-a-i-d, they would never get it. It's not a phonetically consistent word, which means that the letters that we're seeing don't represent the sounds that they traditionally know those letters to make. So we have to upskill them and give them other ways to do that. And what we're going to do today is we're going to run through a few of those. So the first critical point in any decoding of words is that what we try and do is get the children's finger off the word when they hit a sort of a proficient level of reading. And that lets them, because your eyes contract much faster than your finger. But if a child's stuck on an unknown word, always let them bring their finger up. If they're reading below a level 6, I would even encourage to keep their finger on the text, just to give them some guidance. So today we're going to look at a couple of words that children might get stuck on and show you ways in which you can help to assist them to decode that word or to get that word. So for instance, on this page, we'll just start to read from here. It says, Matthew and Mum looked at the books and the toys. Matthew saw the, and this is a big word, and children will often balk at this word, particularly if they're reading on a level 11, which is what this book is. So you might see them do things like w, he, s, t, l, s, and they might even reread it. Now what we need to do is let them try some strategies on their own, usually 2, before we intervene. Then we could say things like this. We could prompt them, and what we're going to prompt them to is a visual aspect that can help them. And in that, the primary visual aspect is the picture. So we would say something like, in this part it says, let's read it again. Matthew saw the. So we know already, let's look at our picture. Who is the author talking about? They're talking about Matthew. So let's have a look. What it's saying here, here's Matthew, and it says Matthew saw the. And they might say over here, oh, Matthew saw the flutes. So they could read it. Matthew saw the flutes. And we'd say something like, yes, that makes sense. That is what he's doing. He's looking at something that looks like a flute. But let's have a look. If it was the word flute, what would it start with? And that's where we bring in their sound awareness. It would start with, let them tell you a f. Okay, well, does that look like a f? No, it doesn't. So let's read it again. Think about Matthew. Think about what he saw. And we might take the first little part that they know, which would be the w. If they don't, you can always prompt them to that as well. So you might say, Matthew saw the w. And inevitably, through years of experience, they will start to associate and think of whistle. So that's a good strategy. So get them to prompt to visual, think about what the character's doing, what the author's saying that they're either doing or saying, and take the first part that they know and use that to help them. Another way that you can do, so we've already looked at meaning, getting the meaning of what's occurring in the book. You may even like to go back a few pages and direct them and prompt them to, remember Matthew was going in the shop to look for a present for Emma. So that you're prompting them to what the story progression looks like. Then you're going to prompt them to visual, as in what's happening in the picture, and even visual parts of words that they know or that can assist them. Another thing that a child might do is to substitute a word that they know into the text that doesn't actually grammatically hold the structure of the sentence. So for instance, you may see a child, sorry for the year marking, I've done that purely for demonstration purposes. You may see a child say, Emma said the whistles, or Emma seed the whistles. So they'll often take the first part of the sound, the word that they see, and they'll make a guess based on that. So let's run with Emma seed the whistles. And she did. If you're looking at the meaning of what she did see the whistles, and this is what they can grasp onto as the event of the text and the visual aspect of the picture. And that's where we would prompt them to say things like, well, Emma did see the whistles, but let's put it into the sentence, Emma seed the whistles. And you'd let them ponder and think, and you could prompt them to say, is that how we would say it? If we were the author, how would we say that Emma, she did see those whistles, but let's think again, Emma seed the whistles. And then you could be prompting back, let's be the author, Emma, and inevitably, once again, they will most likely get saw the whistles. If they'd had a couple of attempts at decoding that word and they were unsuccessful, tell them. But then you could always prompt that throughout the text. So if they then became stuck on it again, later on, you could go back to that word that you decoded together and say, look, it's the same one as back here. So you're using what prior knowledge they had of seed to move it to saw. And then once they've seen it in saw and identified it as saw, if it's seen again in another part of the book, you're taking that familiarity of the decoding on the previous page and linking it back to their new unknown. So there's a few little strategies to help you. One other strategy that we often hear is parents will say, or kids will say, I can sound it out. And what you'll see them do is you'll see them do something like this. So with this word shop, they'll say, I'm going into the s-h-op. Now what we would say there is you could stop them and say, look, you might know what that sound is at the beginning, which is the sh. Hopefully they'll know it. If they don't, you could help them. And then instead of saying sound it out, one strategy that I use personally is I'll say blend those sounds together or slide those sounds together, because when we say words in isolation, it becomes very hard to hear, letters in isolation, it becomes very hard to hear the blended words. So even if I was to say these in sounding out, sh, op, p. So they stand alone. It doesn't give the child anything to hang on to hook on to. So I'm going into the shop. So as your finger passes under each letter, that's how fast it should be. I'm going into the shop. And the same with if you wanted to do help, it would be help. So they can hear it. They can hear it, what it sounds like sliding together. Get rather than get. which doesn't sound like much of a difference, but it really has a significant impact on letting them hear what those sounds sound like when they're blending together. And they will often then, even if they don't get all the way to the end of the word, and the word should be familiar to them, they'll often then correct themselves. So that's another strategy. One of the big strategies is rereading. So take them back to the start of the sentence. It doesn't necessarily have to be the entire page. It can just be the start of that sentence, with again focusing on what is the author telling us? Who are they talking about? What are they doing, or what are they saying? That's the purpose of rereading, not just to reread the words in a sentence. It's to gain more information during the reread. If you've got a more capable reader, a strategy that's great for those readers, but it's usually around that level 15, 16 is when you'd start to employ this strategy, is you can actually read up to the unknown word. Then you can get them to say what they think the word could be and read to the end of the sentence. Now, what that does is it lets them hook on to the meaning of what's happening in the sentence and what the author's trying to tell them, but it also lets them hang on the grammatics of the sentence. So often those children will then be able to either decide at the end of that sentence whether their word was correct, whether it was incorrect, and if it is incorrect, then they can use the grammatics of the sentence to help them try and work out what that word could be. Again, with the blending of those, you would be looking for complex sounds that they know. So that would be words like set letters that, like O and W, when they're together, they can make ow or O. If it's an A and a U together, it can make or. So you're looking at them breaking and blending those words across as their finger passes under them. I hope all of these strategies have helped you in some way and helped your children to remember and to learn unfamiliar words. And part of reading is remembering words that you don't know that you've learned and then using them again in the future. Take care. Bye.